Okay, thanks, Ryla. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Cornelius. I'm with Kreno for now. So for tonight we'll be learning a bit about Express.js. So for this session, don't be shy lah. Just open your mic or just spam the chat. If you have any questions or if you would like to ask anything about Express.js or like just backend development. So for today's session, we'll be focusing more on developing a simple backend server for the which uses the REST API standard using the Express.js framework on the Node.js runtime. So this session, I'll mostly be discussing a bit about the simple ideas on how a backend server works, and also a short hands-on on how to write API routes and stuff. And but this session, you guys can just watch how I do stuff. It's all hands-on is totally optional. Okay, so if you would like to follow along and have a bit of hands-on for today, you can install some of the basic programs that we normally use for developing this API points. For example, hello.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah. Oh, okay. For example, to write code, we can use something like a text editor like Visual Studio Code, which you can download here. And also we will need the Node to have a Node.js runtime installed already. So normally JavaScript is code that's only able to run in the browser. So we can also have it run on a web server itself. But in order to run JavaScript on like a very simple web server, we'll have to install something called a runtime. Basically, it's just a program to run JavaScript code. So this Node.js runtime, you can install it through nodejs.org. Okay, so for example, right now I'm using Linux. So if you visit nodejs.org, you will firstly be greeted by this download page. You can download either the LTS, which is long-term support version, or the current version. I recommend downloading and installing the long-term support version, but because it's more stable. It's proven to be more stable, so it's recommended for most users. Okay, there are also like previous versions of Node.js, like version 12, 14, 16, and 17. And as Chong shared in the Discord server just now, there's something called NVM, which is a program to manage like different Node.js versions. Okay, so that is for Node.js, and it's on the Node.js runtime. So to test like the backend API that we normally develop, we would just use something like Postman for calling APIs or for API testing. So Postman is a special program that we can use to call an API or to pass data. So as you can visit postman.com and click on one of these download buttons. If you're using Windows, you can just click this one, or if you're using Mac, or if you're using Ubuntu, Linux, or Linux, for example, Ubuntu or any other Linux distro. So for example, I can show you that currently I have Postman installed. It takes a bit of time to start Postman. Okay, so just let me clean up my desktop for a bit. Okay, so right now I just started Postman, but it's still not loading. It takes a bit of time. Okay, while Postman is loading, I'll briefly explain introduce a bit of some other stuff that you can do with a backend API backend server. So if you're using a database, you can install a DBMS like MySQL, Postgres, or other database management system to interact with the database on your backend API. So I'll briefly explain a bit on what is a backend and what is a front end. So when we're doing like app development or web development, there's this thing called a client-server model. So the client is basically like what we see on the website itself. Like basically what we call a front end. The front end is like you have your HTML, CSS, and also like the JavaScript code on the front end, which And also the server is the backend server, which interacts with the central server's database, and also does some application logic as well. So traditionally, when you visit a website, the last time when websites are made with PHP, for example, you will firstly visit the website, then the backend server will load the PHP code, and then it will generate the HTML files. After it generates the HTML files, then only it will pass back to the client, and it will render it on the browser. So this is like what the user sees is basically the front end. So when the user clicks another button, then it will ask the backend server to return another HTML file again. So this because every time when you click a button or when you perform an interaction on the website this way, it will require quite a lot of loading time, because it needs to wait for the backend server to return the HTML files. So but in recent years, like when we're developing websites, the backend and front end is separated, so that when the user clicks on the button, it doesn't ask the backend server for another HTML file and then reload the whole web page anymore. It just asks the backend server for the data that's required. Then it will take the data and it will just load it and display on the front end. So this way, it improves the user interaction, the UX of the website itself, as it does not always require like long loading times, and also doesn't require the web page to always reload. So so application backend server consists of like the backend logic, for example, the database, the caching and all those things. Only the things that are stored on the server itself lah. Like maybe your company, you want to start an app, so you need a database to store the user's data, and also the and also other data that's related to your application. No, you store in the database that's on your backend server. So when your user goes to your website, they will just visit the web page, which is the front end, and the user's browser will get the front end files. We get the front end files, we cache it on the front end, and only we render the files on the web browser, and they will be able to see what's on the web page and what buttons to click and all those things. And when it needs to retrieve or push when it needs to get data or to like insert data to the backend server, it will do so by making HTTP requests to retrieve data or to send data to and from the server itself, or the backend server. So to summarize a bit, the client is for showing the front end, the backend server is for doing the logic and also interacting with the company's database. And how there are four types of HTTP request methods when we are doing backend development. So there's the get method, there's the post method, there's the put method, and there's the delete method. So imagine it this way lah, like when we have a backend server, we will only need to perform, most of the times we will only need to perform four actions, which is like we have to get some data from the backend, or we have to for example, when we go to a website on the front end, then we will need to get some data from the backend. So it will read data from the backend server, maybe from the database itself. So it will do so by using a GET request. So for example, another use case is when the user wants to like save some data to the backend server, or wants to submit some data to the server itself, it will do so by using a post request. The post method is used for inserting data to the backend server. And let's say the user wants to update their own data. This is done so using the put or patch request method, which is used for updating the data or insert if there's a new ID in the database. And when the user wants to delete some data from the backend server, they can use the delete method, which is only used for deleting data. Okay, so far, are there any questions so far? Hello?
No questions.
Okay, so far. Okay, and anyone else has any questions?
What's the difference between the...
No questions so far. All good.
Okay. Amir, do you have any questions, Amir?
Oh no, just I want to know the difference between, because it's update also insert data, right? Or no different?
Okay, so like when you post, is you insert like a new data lah. You create something, you create a new data. So but when but for put or patch is for updating like, an existing data. For example, you have a to-do list application, so you want to insert a new to-do item to the backend server, so you do so by using the post method. But if, for example, if you have an existing to-do item and you want to edit the details of that to-do item itself, you will do so by using the put or patch request method. But in general, like some people may use mostly the post method for updating existing data as well. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll just continue with the rest of the session since there's no questions for now. Normally, when you're making like when the front end makes a HTTP request, we will have response codes to know like whether the request is successful. So here are a few like HTTP codes, response codes that's normally used, and you can read more about it here. A HTTP code of 200 means that it's okay, it's successful. If it's a 400 something, then it means there's a problem on the client side. If it's a 500 status code, it's a server error. And for example, a 400 error code is that's 401 and 404. 401 means that it's unauthorized request. For example, you are trying to maybe there's an application that has different roles. For example, there's a user role and there's an admin role. For example, if you're a normal user and you try to do something that's only for an admin, if that means that you are not authorized for this action. So in this case, the backend server should return 401 error code. And another example is that for 404 is that for example, you're trying to get an image from the backend server, but then the backend server doesn't have this image, so you will just return a 404 error. So this is for 401 and 404 is a client side error. So if it's a 500 error, means that it's a server error. Then there's a bug in the server. You have to check manually, or the developer or the maintainer of the backend server will have to check manually on the backend itself. And if it's a 503 status code, it means that the server is overloaded for now. Maybe you wait for a bit later for the server for the traffic on the server to like slow down a bit. Okay, so that's basically an introduction to HTTP and the client server model, as well as types of HTTP request methods. So, any questions for now? Hello?
Questions?
No questions from me.
Well, I think Amir.
No problem.
Sorry, Amir, we can't hear you.
No question. It's okay.
Oh,
Thank you.
I think we can proceed.
Okay, so for now, let's start with a simple like a hands-on session on how we can create a simple backend API server for a basic to-do list application. So okay, so firstly, let me just give me one moment so I can start a project for now. Okay. Okay, so right now, as you can see, this is my text editor for now. I'm currently using VS Code. So here, I'll firstly need to start an npm a Node.js project. So for example, we do so by using the command like npm init-y. Then we would need to so it shows the package.json. This package.json is a simple. It's a file that describes our Node.js project, like for example what scripts that we can run and what's the project name, which version it is, what is the file that this project should run. So as you can see, there's this main property, it says index.js, so which means that we will need to create a file called index.js in which belongs to this Node.js project. Okay, so right now we want to use a framework called Express.js. But we don't have it installed here yet, so we will need to install Node.js using the Node package manager. So Express.js is actually a JavaScript library that runs on Node.js, which we can download using npm. So we can do so by using like the command npm install express. Okay, as you can see, it's trying to download the dependencies for now. Okay. Okay, so just give me one moment. I'm just trying to. Okay, just give me one moment. I'm just trying to open up the webpage for Express.js. So if you would like to learn more about Express.js, you can go to expressjs.com. It shows you like how to, this command shows you like how to install the Express framework on this project, and also there are also like, other links, for example, how to get started, some of the guides, API references, also some more advanced topics. So okay, so as you can see, for now we have installed Express already. Express is installed already, and we can start coding our simple backend server. Okay, so to start an Express server, you need to do a bit of configuration. Firstly, we will need to import the Express library. We do so by declaring this variable called Express. We import the Express library first, then we start an Express an instance of the Express server, and we store in this app variable. And to run a backend server, we need to specify like which port that we want to use to start the server. So in this case, we will just use port 9000. So this port is basically just saying like what's the URL that you want to start your server on. Yeah, that's basically it. So after we import the Express library, we will need to start the server. Basically, when we start the server, we just call app.listen. We ask Express to start the server on this particular port, which is port 9000. And when it starts the server, it will send a message in the console. This console is a function for us to like give us a bit of feedback inside the console. So the console is like this command line interface that prints out some JavaScript that gives us some feedback that we normally use for testing. So as you can see, when we start this Express server, we want it to be on port 9000. We want the app to listen on port 9000, and then when it successfully starts the server, it will give us a feedback message saying that the backend is listening at which particular port. Okay, so we can try to run this server and run this backend and see like if it runs successful. We do so by using node index.js. So as you can see, when we run this file, it says that backend is listening at localhost 9000, which means that right now our simple backend is running already. Okay. So so far, are there any questions so far? So far so good, or any questions?
What package you install?
Okay, so I was installing Express, npm install Express. Yeah. Okay, so I'll continue for a bit. So this one is a very simple web server that we just started, but it doesn't really do much. It only shows the message that the backend is running at this port. So for example, we want this to be a to-do list application, a simple to-do list backend. Maybe, for example, we say that we want to store like a list of items. Let's say we store the to-dos in an array. So this maybe you can say that okay, the first to do is like for example, watch TV. Then maybe the second to do is maybe read a book, for example. Maybe the third item that we want to learn Express.js, for example. So in this example, I only store the to do items in an array, but normally you want to store in the database. Okay, so now we are able to store a bit of data on the backend server, but for example, when we want the user to be able to get the list of to-dos that we have here, we will use a GET request. We want the Express server to know that when the user makes a GET request, we want to return this list of to-dos, to-do items. So we do so by using the app.get function. This app.get function, firstly it takes like what URL that you want to listen on for this GET request, and what you want to do frequently. It takes this URL and also a function. Which takes in the request response. What's the next function to call? But this one you don't need to worry much. It's just this request is basically the request object. Basically when the front end makes a request, when they call this API, this function here, what data does it pass in? And this REST is actually a response object, which is what we want to send back to the front end or to the people who call this function from the client side. So let's say for this GET request, we want to return this list of to-dos. So we do so by returning something. We return the response. Say we return a status code of 200. Then we pass back the to-do, call the JSON function, pass back the data in JSON format. So since right now we are trying to write we're using Express.js. Express.js passes data in the form of JSON, JavaScript object notation. So whenever we want to pass data back from the backend server to the front end, we call the JSON function and then pass back the data and give it a dictionary and specify what we want to pass back specifically. So for example, right now we want to only pass back this list of to-dos, right? Then we'll just say that, okay, so to-do list, we want to return a to-do list and then return this array over here. Okay, so right now we saved this file already. Then we try to run the app again. Node index.js. As you can see, it's listening right now. And we will need to use Postman to test our backend server. So right now, we have Postman running over here, and we can specify using Postman is for us to call APIs or for us to test our API endpoints. Right now we can choose which request method that we want to use. So just now we covered about get, post, put, patch, or delete, but there are also other request methods that are available here. But we normally only use this file. This file mostly. This is for getting data. This is for sending data. This is for put, patch is for updating data. Delete is for data. So right now we want to, since we declare this get endpoint on our backend server, we want to say that we want to take the URL. So in this case, it's localhost port 9000, and then we put a slash, which is for like the ending URL for this function. So when we have this URL over here, we choose the GET request. Then we can click send. What send does is that it makes a API call. Basically, when you click send, it will ask the backend server that we have here to call this particular function. So we can try to do it now. Try to click send, and as you can see, we have some data returned from the backend server. So this body, there's a few things here. There's a body, there's a cookie, there's a headers, and the test result. But for now, we just need to look at this body section. As you can see, there's this status 200 OK, and as we've seen in our slide just now, there are a few HTTP with response codes. 200 means that it's OK. So as you can see, this one, it returns a status code of 200. It means that this HTTP request, request is OK. It's being run successfully, and there's some data that's returned here. As we can see, there's a to-do list, and there's 3 items in this to-do list, which is the data that we have defined here. So as you can see, this server, when we start this server, we want the to-do list to be saved in memory for this server. So when we start the server, the to-do list will only have these 3 items. So later on, when we make HTTP requests, we can edit the to-do list items, or we can delete items and all those, or insert new to-do list items. So okay. So that's all for that. So this is a very simple GET request, a GET request function. So far, are there any questions?
No questions from me.
Okay. Okay, so I'm assuming that are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
When we need to use npm start and then you use a not index.js. I'm quite confused there.
Okay, so this is very normal. When I started learning like JavaScript, Node, and npm, I was also very confused about this. But no worries, I will just go through this simple question. Actually, it's not a simple question. It's a question that I think that plagues a lot of beginners when we all start to learn Express.js and JavaScript in general. So Node.js, this Node thing is that Node is a runtime. So when you want to run, for example, when you're writing some Python code, you have a Python file. You have some code here, for example. Let's say for example we have this run.py file. It's a Python file. So for example, in this Python file, we can just write a bit of a hello world. This line basically just says that okay, so just print this hello world to the terminal or the command prompt if you're using it. So you have this Python code here. So in order to run this Python code, you have to call python run.py. Or in my case, it's python 3 run.py . But if you're using Mac, maybe you also need Python 3. But if you're using Windows, probably you just need to call python run.py. So in order to run this Python code, you need to call Python the Python interpreter, and then you need to pass the file into them. Then the file into the Python interpreter, then it will run the codes that are in the file. So similar to JavaScript, we can't just say that index.js, then to run this JavaScript file. So we will need to use something similar to this one, this syntax. So when we want to run some JavaScript code, you normally start a .js file. So as you can see, this file is a .js file here. So a .js file is normally it means that this file is a JavaScript code. It's a file for JavaScript code. So when you have some JavaScript code in this file, a .js file, you want to run it. You will normally run it this way, node index.js, after you have installed Node. Or if you want, you can also copy this the code over here. You can open the web browser and then you run the code inside the console of the web browser, or you can just import this JS file into the HTML file. Then you open the HTML file in the web browser. That's how JavaScript is normally used inside the web browser. But in this case, we want to run JavaScript code without a web browser, so we will just run it this way. We just say node index.js. So this is for running a JavaScript file. But npm stands for Node Package Manager. So when we say that npm, let's say you want to do something like npm run start. Okay, so as you can see, it says that there's a missing script here, missing script start. Let's say you want to run this JavaScript file, but you want to make it a bit simpler to running the whole backend server maybe. That's where we use npm scripts. So npm scripts you can say it's a special script that we can define in this package.json file. So that let's say we can write a start script. So when the user runs npm, when the user runs npm run start, what code do we want to do in this backend server? So for example, in this case, we want to say that when the user plans to do npm run start, it should use Node to run the index.js file. So here we will say that this script here, the package scripts here, we specify a start script. Basically, this start script is like when you're trying to collaborate with other developers. When they download your repo, they want to have a standardized way of running your server. So this standardized way, we normally use a start script to specify how to run our backend server. So in this case, we will say that okay, so when the user decides to do npm run start, it should run the index.js the file using. So here we will say that node index.js. So in this case, just now we have this error here. It says that there's a missing script here. So right now, since we've already defined a start script here, basically we want to run node index.js, and if we run now, you can see that it's running already. Basically, this instead of running node index.js, you can specify it in a special script called the start script, and then you just do npm run start. This is done within the package.js file. So a special point about this idea here is that, for example, if when you want to run your backend server, maybe the command is very long. It's very long, and then you don't want to always like retype the whole command whenever you restart the server. Then you just put the command here inside this start script. Then every time when you want to start the server or restart the server, you just do an npm run start. Okay. So is it clear?
Clear. Thank you.
Okay, so another point that I want to raise, similar to this slide, is that as you see just now, right? Like whenever we make changes to this index file, right? Let's say we want to make another when the user tries to do a get, right? We want to return something else. Maybe we say that alongside this to-do list, alongside the to-do list that we have, we want to return something like a special message. We say that this special message, and we say that, like, let's say we want to say hello there, for example. So as you can see right now, I've saved the file already, and when I try to use Postman to make another request, call again, as you can see, there's only this to-do list. There's no message over here. So this is because every time when we make a change to our backend server, we have to stop the server first. This is done by pressing Ctrl button and Ctrl C. And as you can see, when we press on Ctrl C, it will stop the server. Then we have to restart the server. Restart our backend server. So whenever we restart, when we restart, then only it will like restart. We run the whole code in index.js after we make changes lah. So as you can see right now, when we click on send, it will send us a message as well. This message is from here lah. So as you can see, it is a bit tedious that every time when we make some changes to the backend code, we have to restart the whole server again, right? So there's a special package in npm that helps us to watch the files. Basically, whenever we make changes, we don't need to restart the server anymore. So we will just install this package called npm install nodemon. We will install nodemon first, and instead of using node to run the file, we will just use nodemon. What nodemon does is that whenever we make changes to the file and we click save, it will automatically help us to restart the server. So as you can see here, it's done installing already. So right now, if we try to do nodemon index.js, we try to. Okay, so nodemon is not found. Yeah. Okay, nodemon. If you want to use nodemon, we have to declare it inside the start script. So the start script was like just now it was node index.js. Now we are using nodemon index.js. So we are trying to use nodemon to run the JavaScript script already. So as you can see right now, it says that nodemon starting node index.js. So when we call nodemon does and node index.js. Nodemon calls node as well underneath. So as you can see right now, the backend is running already. So let's say, okay, so now the message is hello there. Let's say right now we try to change this the data that's here. Let's say instead of hello there, we say that I love cats, for example. Then when you click on save right now I click on save already. As you can see, nodemon helps us to restart the server already. It detects that there's some changes to our source code. It helps us to restart already. So if you try to use Postman to make another request again, as you can see now the message is I love cats already. So as you can see, like if you have a smaller project, using nodemon is very useful to help us to automatically restart the server, the backend server whenever we make changes. But when you have when you start to have many files, for example a few thousand files, or when your backend server starts to get really very heavy, nodemon might not be a very good idea because it might end up using much more RAM than just using node itself. Okay, so here we have this basic this get request already. So as you can see, whenever we use Postman, we try to ask the backend to get the list of to-dos that we have. you can see that we have this get request here that we can utilize to get the to-do list. But for example, right now, we want to create a post request to add a new item to this to-do list. So how we do so is that we use app.post. Basically, app.post, then we specify like what's the URL, what's the route, and also what's the function that it should be executing. So for example, when it posts to this to-do route, it should whenever it posts to this to-do route, it should add to this to-dos array. So we can do so. We will need to access the request object to access the data that's being passed in. So for example, when we make a post request, we say that we pass in the form of JSON. Let's say we have an item, and let's say this item is have an item, and this item, let's say we say that instead of just having these 3 items in this, that right now we also want to play games as well. We want to say that we want to add the play games item to the list. So this is how we make a post request in Postman. You give it a route. Oh yeah, it says post to do, right? Post / to do. So you have to use the / to do route. You make sure that it's a post request. Then you pass in the data. In the request body, you choose raw and you choose JSON. So in this case, the data that we pass in is this object here, which has the property item, and the value is play games. So whenever we click on send, it will call this function here, and in this function we can access the data that's being passed over here. So how we do so is that let's say right now we don't really know like how to access the data yet. We say we do this console. We try to log the request object to the console to see what's being passed back. As you can see, there's this thing here. There's this large object here, but then this large object here that represents the whole request object itself. But we don't need this entire object. We just need the data that's being passed in. So in order to access this the data here, let me see here. Let's see if this works. Okay, just give me one moment. Just trying to check one thing. Oh, okay. So I think I forgot one thing already. So because right now we're trying to like post data from the front end to the backend server, so we will need there's some special configuration on Express.js where we will have to use these two include these 2 lines of code. Basically, we want to tell Express.js to be able to pass to be able to like understand JSON data as well as to understand like URL and the URL encoded request body. Basically, in Express.js, when we want to use for example this JSON data, when we want to like accept JSON data in the request body or use this URL encoded form data type, then we have to specify it over here when Javascript is. Basically, it's we want to use the Express.json middleware as well as the Express URL encoded middleware. So this is just some configuration stuff on Express.js. Right now, if you try to send if you try to make a post request with the data here, right? And as you can see, right, inside, hello. Okay, so inside this request.body, it is this particular item over here. This request.body is this whole thing over here. There's this item and the value is play games. So that's what we have in this request body. So let's say we want to, for this item here, we want to add it to the user. We will say something, we will write something like let the item, let the to do be the request body dot item, and then to do dot push to do. Then after that we will say, so we take this item here, we access this item first, we store it in this variable, then we take this to do variable, we add it to this array. So this to do dot push to do basically just means that take this variable and then add it to the end of this to do's array. So maybe after we've added to this to do list, we want to return the whole to do list as well, then we will just write the code that we have here just now lah. We just copy and paste. We return a status code of 200, a response with a status code of 200 with the to do list here, and maybe we can also have a message here saying like successfully added. Successfully added this particular to do. So a very in JavaScript there's a special string syntax. For example, if you want to have a string and then you want to concatenate the value of a variable to a string, normally you will do something like a successfully added plus to do, right? But then in JavaScript there's this special string, this string template notation where if you use backticks to define a string, start and end of string, then you use this syntax to include the variable that you want to put it here lah. So in this case, it will just say, let's say the item is play games. Let's say the item is play games here. Then here it will just say successfully added play games. The item play games lah. So if you try to send this request over here, as you can see, the play games item. This item is successfully added to our to-do list, and we get this message over here lor. Okay. So far is it clear? So far, are there any questions so far about writing a get and post request in Express? Hello?
Question. Usually, they always use the Json file, or can that one is not like lock, need to use Json?
Oh, okay. So I think most of the time we would use. I think it depends on what you want the backend server to do, and also what format that you want to use. I think if I'm not mistaken, most of the time now, currently JSON is very popular in a lot of APIs. So if you try to use the Twitter API, or for example the Twitter API, or maybe a Google API or other API, because currently like tech companies, they also they also put out their own APIs for developers as well. So normally the APIs that they use, the data, they will normally return data in the form of JSON. So JSON is a you can say that it's a data format. It's currently is the most widely used, it's the most famous one. So that's why here in this short session we will just try to use JSON lah. But also there are other formats as well. For example, you can use like GraphQL instead, or like a typical HTML form, or a special type of a URL encoded form lah. And also you can use other types as well, like HTML or XML, or just normal text. But most of the times we use JSON right now. Okay. It's not required lah, but then it's not required. It's up to you. You can use JSON or XML or other types of or other formats lah. But currently in web development we use JSON mostly.
Okay. Alright.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
As you explained that when we use the app.post, right? So we need to use the app.use express JSON, and also the other one app.use express URL encode, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. What if the extent that we change to false? Can you explain that?
Oh, actually, this how to say as you can see, this here is this URL encoded this form data. So we can either pass in the data in the request body, either in, for example, in form data in the format of form data, or URL encoded form data, or in like raw JSON. So So this line here only tells Express that we want to allow the JSON to read in like the request body in the form of JSON, and then this is to read in the request body in the form of URL encoded. Mostly, if I'm not mistaken, if you try to put this to false, it won't really work for URL encoded body. But then maybe we can try to do it now, see if it works out. See if it's like play games. Let's say instead of us trying to use JSON, we try to use a URL encoded form to try to send the data here. So maybe in here we will just try to we try to do it here. Try to click send. And as you can see, it can add here can add here, but if you try to put this to false, the format of the data changes actually. So there's instead of just this value here, it's now an object with a null prototype. But yeah, actually I don't really know like what this extended does. But if you see here, it says this extended option allows to choose between passing the URL encoded data with the query string library when false or the QS library when true. So it's just like specifying which particular library that you want to pass the URL encoded data. But normally I think most of the time we just use the, as you can see here, it's false when it's using query string, it's true when it's using QS. So most of the time we will just use true. Most of the times we will just use true. But I think in general there's not too much of a difference. Yeah, I'm actually not sure about this question because I mostly use JSON. Okay. Yeah, it's I don't know how to answer this question but I guess we just leave it here. Most of the times we just use true if you want to allow the users to pass in data in the format of a URL encoded form. Okay, any other questions? Hello?
No questions.
No questions.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, alright.
Okay. Okay, so maybe right now we've seen like how to write a get and how to write a post request. So let's say we want to update the first item in this to-do list array. Then we will normally do so by using a request called the put function. This function really will say like which route that we want to handle. Say this when the user clicks calls the put request with slash to do route. Say for now we will just this write a simple function. So it changes the first element. So we will just take in the item for the request body. Then we will reassign first item to be this to do. Then we will return this the entire to do list array successfully updated. Maybe we can just we just say that successfully updated this to do. Okay. So if you try to change, let's say this instead of the first item being watch TV, I want to change the first item to be say Genshin, for example. Then I would call the slash to do route, it's right here, use the put request method, then pass in the data which is the item here, and instead of having watch TV, we just replace it to be play Genshin. So if you try to click send, you can see that in this to-do list array, the first item been replaced from watch TV to play Genshin, and you can see the remaining of the as well as a success message saying that successfully updated the to-do list array. So this is how we normally write a put. So right now we've seen these three request types, right? normally when we develop a full-fledged backend or app itself, we normally don't specify the variable here. We get the when the user, for example, when the user calls this get route, it will get the data from like database. Then after it gets data from database, then it only returns data user this following line lah. So maybe it will say something like the data from database, then we just and from post it will, instead of changing instead of just pushing to this array, we will do something like we just get to do item from the request body first, and then insert to do item into database, then only return success message to the client. So that's how we normally like write a post request, and when we do a put request, it's normally like we the same thing, like we just get the to do item from the request body, then we update database with the to do item, and then only we return the success message. Okay, so that's how we normally write. How we normally use put post as well as get in writing the backend API routes. And also there's one more that I would like to cover for today, which is request timeout. So in order to accept like a delete, in order to use delete, let's say when the user tries to go to this to do backend route, it will delete the last to do this item from this array. So this slash to do it won't take any data from the request body. Let's say when the user calls slash delete, it will just delete from here. Okay, so let's say let this to do item be the last. So we will call the pop function for this array. This pop function, what this does is that it removes the last element from the array, then it stores it here, it returns it here. Then this, whenever we call this function, instead of this to do having these 3 items, now you only have 2 items. So right now, let's say for this delete function or delete route, on this function to remove the last item from this array and also to return it. So here we will say let to do delete remove from the array first, then only return it to the user's front end. Here we say like return res status 200 JSON fully deleted, and here you can see that it will return the to-do list, the entire to-do list, as well as which particular to-do that it managed to move. So here if you try to call the delete route, we won't be passing any data in the request body. We'll just make a request, and as you can see, the to-do list now only has 2 items. It says that okay, the message is successfully deleted the last item from the array, which is learn express.js. Okay, so here, but in real world usage, it's normally like it gets the ID of the item that you would like to delete in the request body. Then you delete from database. Then you return success message. So this is what you normally do when you're writing like actual API endpoints which interact with the database. You get the ID, then you delete the item from the database based on this ID, then you remove the success message, similar to this one, but this one uses the database instead. So yeah, I think that's most of the things that I would like to cover for today's session. Like how to write these few routes And also later I'll show a bit of like other tricks that we normally use in Express.js. Are there any questions so far? So, okay. So I'm assuming that there are no questions for now. So now since we covered like how to write a get request, a post request, a put request, and also a delete request, and how to handle it on the backend itself, then you might be thinking that maybe like this index, when we are trying to do an actual app, there might be we might write a lot of different routes for different entities. So if you want to put all the routes inside this same file, it might get very messy. As you can see, there's only 4 simple routes over here, and the file itself is already 60 lines of code. Then maybe if we want to write maybe 100 routes, for example, and maybe each route has like 20 lines of code or 50 lines of code, then we can't really put all this in this single file. It will get very messy and very hard to manage. So to make it easier to manage routes, we will normally use something called a router. So a router basically, in simple terms, a router basically helps us to compartmentalize our routes. So maybe, for example, you have 10 routes to deal with this to-do list, and maybe you have 20 routes to do with like user management, or maybe you have other routes for other purposes. Normally group all the routes together in the same router, then you will import the router into this server script over here. So how we use a router is we will normally define a function, not really a function, a folder called routers, and within these routers we normally define all the routers that we want to use. For example, as you can see right now we have these few routes for to-dos. Then maybe we will want to create something called a to-do router. We put the route inside the routers. We declare the routers inside JS files. So, for example, here we have to-do.js, and in this to-do.js, we will firstly need to like import Express first. Similar, need to import Express first and declare a router. We'll say we want this to be a to-do router. Then we will declare all the routes over here. Then finally we will export the router over here. Okay, so we will just cut everything that we have here. Yeah, we just cut everything that we have here. Just put delete. Let's say we want to move all these routes to our to-do router. Instead of putting app, we will just do router.delete and .post, and maybe we'll just put this one as well inside this to-do router, the get request in the router. And instead of declaring the to-do list here, we will declare it inside this to-do list router file. Then we will want to export this whole router from this router file to script. So how we do so is we just write module.exports equal to router, and now we are exporting this router here. We want to import it here, and we will say app.use / do to-do router, but we will have to import the to-do router first. To-do router require routers / to-do. So here you don't need to write .js lah. You just need to specify the file name. Because a Node.js or Express.js they can Express.js automatically knows that this to-do router is a JS file. Then you will try to look for this routers and try to look for this to-do.js. We import the router file here. Then we can say that okay, so whenever the user calls /to-do routes, it will use this router. So here you see that most of the routes here we have this /to-do. So which means that initially when we call /to-do, it will just call these routes. But since here we say that okay, so whenever the user calls any routes that have slash to do, we want the to do router to handle it, then it will automatically pass the routes to here to this router to handle. So instead of right now, if we just maintain it this way it would be something like slash to do, which is a bit redundant and also a bit messy and hard to manage. So instead of having this slash to do, we just delete this and just put slash. So as you can see, since right now we organize our server script a bit more neatly. So instead of like 60 lines in the same file, we just put all the code that's related to do this here. Then we just import it here, and as you can see, it's our server script. Our main server script is much more easier to manage now. Okay, so now we can try to test and see if it works. So maybe we can just say we can just do a get request to try to get all the items to do this. And as you can see, right, by using this router approach, it's still able to call these functions here. So as we can see, like here we try to do a get request on slash to do. It's able to get our to do this and this success feature, which is what we have here. Okay, so this is how we normally organize. This is like the typical structure of an Express.js project. And as you can see, this if you have more features that you want to add, let's say this to do this, you want it this to do router, you want to have much more features of functionality. You can definitely use much more routes as well. And also maybe instead of let's say for example, instead of you can also get some data from the get request as well. So let's say you want to be able to maybe get a string from the user through a get request. Then you can use something like something like a variable here, which tries to look at this route here and the route that you call and try to see whatever that's being passed here. For example, this thing here, this string here, it will go to this item here. So in order to access this variable here, it's a bit different than how we access the request body through the other request methods. To access this item here, we will need to, let's say, we store in the variable then do equals to request params.item. So what request params.item does that is that you want to be able to accept a string inside this URL here, this custom string from the user. And when you want to access it, you need to the request parameter. This one is called a get request parameter. Get request parameter. And in order to access this parameter here, you just type in request.params.item, the same name that you put here. So let's say you want to change this to cat then this part you also have to change to cat. Then maybe for now you just put the data that we've gotten from this request parameter, and maybe you try to return it to the front end. The HTTP request will see how it's like. So you can see that this one, it will call the slash to do route, and then it will have this as the this request parameter. So if you try to click send, the cat is not defined. Press the params. Okay, so cat is not defined. Give me a second. Okay,
Line 51.
line 51. Oh, okay. It's to do It's not cat Anyways, we can just put it here It's the variable cat. Variable to do. I used the wrong variable name. It should be to do. It shouldn't be cat So if we try to call again over here, as you can see, it's able to get the data that we passed inside this URL parameter through a get request. So in short, when you want to pass data from the front end through when calling an API, you can either pass data inside the request body, where if you want to pass data in the request body, you can just go to this post, make a post request, and you go to request body and you add the data over here. But instead of sending data on using a post request, you can also send data using a get request. But by doing so, the data that you send in the get request will appear in the URL itself lah. So when you're sending like sensitive data, for example, a username or password, you will normally want to use a post request instead of a get request because if you're using a get request, the data itself will appear on this URL. So that's let's say we want to change this data to something else. Let's say cat change it to cat, then it appears here as well. Since it's being passed, it's being passed in into this request parameter. So yeah, I think that's all for today lah. That's all for today. Where we discuss like how to start an npm project, how we install the Express.js framework, how we start Express.js server, and how do we define routes or API endpoints in Express.js. How do we handle API endpoints or routes, and how do we use routers to manage the endpoints that we have? How do we compartmentalize it based on the over here? It's just a this purpose, and also, as well as how to get data from request itself, whether it be through the request body or through the request parameters in the get request. So I think that's all for today. Do you guys have any questions?